Wallace informed me that. So, thank you, Wallace. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Rhonda Pollard.
Hey, Rhonda.
My sobriety date is March 6th of 2007. I have a sponsor who is not here tonight. I have a home group, the Crossroads Group at McGee's Crossroads, and I sponsor women myself. I read something early on in my sobriety in the grapevine that I always like to kind of share. It's one of those little jokes, and it kind of just helps me get where I need to be. It's what's the difference between the optimist, the pessimist, and an alcoholic? And as it goes, the optimist looks at the glass and says the glass is half full. The pessimist looks at the glass and says it's half empty. The alcoholic looks at the glass and wants to know, are you going to drink that drink or what? Yep, I drank that drink. While it's an interesting story or whatever, I kind of think my drinking career was a little boring. There was no real tragedy in my life. However, there was a lot of made-believe, fantasy, whatever, tragedies that I thought. I grew up in an alcoholic home, came from alcoholism. It wasn't a terrible home. It was actually rather pretty good in hindsight. But it was still, alcoholism, and of course it was the only normal I knew. Drinking was, pretty much there, all the time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some characteristics of myself that I now know through working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. But let's see, early on, I was told by my mother that I would argue with a rock. And so it wouldn't matter who was right or whatever, I would argue. I know that I was told early on that, well, actually, I have written proof from my second grade report card that said Rhonda does not play very well with others. She prefers to play alone. So that was something else that, I had to my favor. Also that I can't really remember a lot about my past as far as early, childhood memories, nothing. I didn't have, like I said, no tragedies, but I have bits and pieces here or there or photographs I can look back upon and think about a memory, but I don't really know if it was a memory or the photo. But I started drinking very early, somewhere between 12 and 13 years of age. Alcohol was in my home. It was very easy to get to. The kitchen was full of it, and we had a basement bar that was full of it. And about the age of 13, I moved down to the basement, so I had pretty much daily access to alcohol. I also can tell you I never learned the word no, and I didn't say no to anything that came my way when I was drinking. I crossed nevers at a very early age. I can't say that I drank every day then. I don't, like I said, I don't really remember. I do know that I was having blackouts from the very beginning. I didn't have nobody to compare notes to because I wouldn't tell anybody anything. I was one of those tight ships that everything was going to go down with me, when I died. So, I don't know. I can even remember at 16 years of age, I was hanging out at bars when I didn't even have the ability to drink legally. I love drinking. Drinking let me be somebody else and be somewhere else. And that's what I always wanted. I was never satisfied with what I had. I was a spoiled, rotten little girl. I can tell you that. I do know that. My father gave me the world. I wanted a pony, I got a horse. My very first automobile was a Porsche. So that was, some of the things that Rhonda wanted it, Rhonda got it. And of course that made for a bad adult later on in life. But things like that, that was just my normal. I came to expect it. So drinking didn't cause any major problems for me. I got a DUI about age 24, and that was not a big deal to me. I got my license suspended. I got to do community service, and but I kept on doing what I was doing. I didn't think nothing about drinking. I can remember a point in time in my life when drinking started becoming a problem, when I was having so many blackouts. And I had already gotten married, and after my first child with my husband, I can remember making a concession that, liquor was causing the problem, so I was going to start drinking beer. I just knew it was liquor, so I continued drinking beer. And I didn't grow up as an atheist. I actually grew up believing in a higher power, believing in God. We went to church, not regularly, but we did attend. But it was our normal lives was to have big blowout arguments, or whatever. But everybody would sit down at the dinner table, or we'd go to church the next day. Things like that would occur. So that was just a normal activity in our house. I think the dinner table was always taking topics of conversation of other people and other things. We never talked about ourselves. But I think in the latter couple of years of my drinking is when I really started, having, the problems started coming, but I did not recognize them. I can recall going to my mother's house, and she would always ask me, "Why do you have to be drinking all the time?" And I just thought it was, she was just being gripey, her natural gripey self. And because that was one of the things, my father was the drinker, so my mom was the neurotic. She was the one always complaining and, about everything else going on. And I'm trying to, when I mentioned about not being satisfied, one thing alcohol could do for me, it would fix that. It would fix me, and I would be able to continue on and do what I need to do. But it got to the point in my life where I was drinking to do everything. It became originally it started out pretty much weekends during after the children came, because I ended up having 3 kids with my husband, and I actually thought that that another baby would fix me, another baby would solve the problem, because I had this emptiness inside of me. So I was, I guess I was reaching for things, and I thought children would do it. After the 3rd child, I still had that emptiness, and it came back, and it would come back with a vengeance, and it seemed it was growing stronger. The weekends started turning into weekdays. The vow I made to not drink until after 12 started becoming earlier in the day, because it was always 5 o'clock somewhere. Those were little consolation prizes. I deserved it. Or I was having a bad day, or if you had the life I had, or was married to the person I was married to, or if you had my mom, all those things that I considered to be bad things in my life. Because one thing I found out when I got to AA, I blamed everybody in my life for everything that was wrong with me and going on with me. So when I said I was starting to drink to do everything, I was to cook, to go out to dinner. Anything I had, that was going on in my life, I had to do. I had to drink to do it. And then it became where I was actually things started getting so bad in my life, I started running away from home. I would just leave my children in the yard with the grandma next door, and I'd drive off and disappear for a couple of days. I started locking myself up in a bonus room. The last time I did that was on October 7th of 2006. Or actually it was the 6th that night, but the next day was my son's birthday, and it was a birthday I ruined. I had locked myself up in the room with a gun and told everybody to leave me alone. That was where I had gone. I have a picture of myself from that on his birthday, so I carry it with me in my big book to remind myself of what I looked like that day, because that was a person that I don't want to be no more. I don't want to ever go back to that. But that didn't stop I didn't stop drinking that day. I continued on. I think I ruined Thanksgiving. Got through Christmas okay that year. But right after the first of the year, I thought, well, even might be New Year's, and started back. And I was one of those, I always believed, I literally believed that I got this. I'm not going to do this no more. It's not going to happen again. And not only would I tell others that, but I believed myself. That was what, I've got this. It's not going to happen again. And then it would happen again. And I'm going to step back a little early on. When I was in my early teens and 20s and drinking, I also had a philosophy that only the good die young. I really I did believe that. Because I guess to be honest, I didn't believe I was really worth anything. I thought I was bad. I was the black sheep of the family. Everybody talked about me. It was, and it wasn't good. So that was one of my, my philosophies, and I can remember even when I was 19, I even got baptized, and thinking that this was going to wash me clean. I'll be able to start fresh, but I couldn't live the way that I thought everybody else, the straight and narrow, because it wasn't fun. And drinking became where it wasn't fun anymore. The fun was long gone. Like I said earlier, I crossed nevers early on. I crossed a lot more of those nevers later in life too. I did things that I never thought I would do, and I realize now, a lot of the damage I had done. And the weekend, I had family members trying to seek help from me, but Rhonda never wanted help. My mother was making phone calls, and seeking out, send me somewhere to some treatment place or something, and I was one of those people who said, I got this, I'm not going, I don't need to go nowhere. Plus, my 3 kids, they need me. I had excuses for everything. But along the path, they had, my aunt had known a preacher alcoholic. And they asked me if I'd talk to him, so I said sure. So I had met him in early October sometime, maybe around my son's birthday, and started talking to him. But we never talked about alcohol. We just talked about, things that I don't even know what we really talked about. It didn't work, but but I couldn't get honest. That was the thing. I know that now. My mother even hooked me in going to a therapist. She was going to this therapist for a while, and she came to me one day and said, I was telling my therapist about you. She thinks you're a very interesting person. She'd like to meet you. Hooked me for a little while. But the therapist eventually told me that I was wasting my time and my money and her time, and until I could get honest, I didn't need to attend anymore, come back when I was ready to get honest. So, fast forward a couple months into February of 2007, I can't tell you anything any different from that weekend, from the weekend before, but this AA member happened to call me and told me that he was going back to AA. And, at first, I was not in a very good place at the time he called, and I just said, I'm glad you are, good for you, and I hung up the phone call. But for something worked in me, and I kept thinking about him. In fact, he was going back to AA, and I guess maybe that was the thought. He said he was going back to AA, and I don't know. So I called him about 2 or 3 days later and asked him, like he was lying to me about something, like, are you really going back? Are you going to an AA meeting? And I can't tell you why I called. I have no idea. I didn't. It's not like I thought I didn't think I had a problem with alcohol. And he said, yeah, sure. And he was going Thursday night, and he told me to meet him at his house at so-and-so time, and I did. So February 22nd of 2007, he took me to my first AA meeting in the little town of Coates. And it was a 30-minute drive to that meeting, and he was so excited, and I wasn't. at all. I think the closer we got there, the less my excitement really wore off early on, so I found out. But he did the whole ride there. He kept telling me that he had somebody he wanted me to meet, and as soon as I got there, that she would, he would turn me over to her, and then his hands would be, he wouldn't, I guess he was just going to turn me over to her. So I ended up meeting her and a bunch of people that night, and it was a speaker meeting that night. I do love speaker meetings because I realized they saved my life, because I got to hear 4 speakers in my first 4 meetings. So there was so much I could identify with, and I didn't have to do anything. So that night, I got a big book, and I heard some stuff, and if I recall, I'm pretty certain that the chip was brought to me. I didn't get up and walk up and get the chip. But I went to a meeting that Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, and Monday morning came, and I went right back to doing the same thing I've always done. It's like I could not do it. It was just that draw, that just insatiable urge. Just I couldn't get away from it. It was, I couldn't, dropping the kids off at daycare and school, and it was, I'm just off to the races. And however, I kept going to the meetings. Don't know why. I'm actually, the Monday night meetings, the home group I'm at now, and I know those people knew that I wasn't right. They didn't tell me to leave. They told me to keep coming back. They gave me their names and phone numbers, and those ladies still swarmed around me. So I don't know, something that I guess that night really it's not. I didn't stop that night. I continued on for about another 2 weeks, but I guess it was. I kept seeing more of something I'd never seen before, and I immediately wanted something the other people had. Of course, when I want something, that's Rhonda always gets what she wants, but it didn't quite work that way. I had to actually admit something, and that I've never been able to ask for help before, and it got down to that point. I was going to a meeting every night, and I was calling this lady every night, and I got to the point where I really, really wanted what I saw in a meeting. So I called her that night, and I admitted to her that I had been drinking, and I asked for her help that night. And that was the first time ever in my life that I asked for help. I was one of those self-reliant people that always wanted, I never asked for you to help me do anything. If the furniture had to be moved in the house, I did it. If so-and-so needed to be done, I did it. That was one of the things I always, thought I was that person, that was a strength or, something. I don't know. I really don't even know why. But I asked for help that night, and she became my sponsor that night. And she told me to meet with her the following Tuesday, and I did, and we went to the meeting. And this time, I wanted that white chip. I got up, and I got that white chip, and I wanted it with all my heart. I still have that white chip today, so hopefully it'll be the last white chip I have to pick up. And I believe if I continue working the program at AA, I won't have to. That night, she asked me, was I willing to go to any lengths? And I said yes. So she said jump. I didn't ask how high, I just jumped. She said be at her house at so-and-so time. I said yes, ma'am. I followed every suggestion she gave to me. I prayed, I read the literature, I met with her once a week, I was at a meeting every night. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days, and when that was up, I said I need 90 more. So I continued on for another 90. And a lot of things happened in very early recovery. I mean, I was, of course, crazy. Couldn't sleep, staying up all night, reading, and although I was drinking, my husband was drinking too, and there was our home was a very volatile home. Our three kids were, I guess, really being tortured, if you want to call it that, in a sense, because they had two parents that were really selfish and self-centered, and just, we had a power struggle going on in our house. I wanted the power and he wanted the power. So, although I started talking about it briefly, I kind of had to, because the home was volatile, I made a decision to leave him early in recovery. And it was a necessary, change that needed to be made, although I know it's not recommended. But it's saved, I believe, my life today. He was still drinking, and of course he didn't want his best friend to quit drinking too. So it was just not easy. But it actually, I guess, provided me the foundation, though, that to really grab hold. I stuck with the Winters. I was going to meetings all over the place, all over North Carolina. I used to joke that my sponsor's husband would leave a different way from their house, so I never knew how to get anywhere. And that was the truth, because he would take a right and we'd end up somewhere, or he'd take a left and then this other road. And so for the longest time, I really had to depend on them to get anywhere. If I was going to go to these meetings I had been to. But I started getting involved. It was, as far as suggested, we go to some retreats, and I started retreats and started with my first state convention was the following year. I was a year and a couple months, and I was able to get up behind the podium and read how it works, for my sponsor that got to speak. And that was just an honor in itself. So I started getting involved early on in service work. My sponsor had me at 60 Days of Sobriety, being the Grapevine representative. That's where I got to learn all these jokes from. And I've got several more, but I won't tell you anymore. But I used to have to, because when I got to AA, I didn't think I had a problem. I wouldn't talk to nobody, and I wouldn't tell you nothing. And so I'd sit in there and keep quiet and not say a word. And so when she made me the Grapevine representative, I had to open my mouth up and say my name, and that I was an alcoholic. And that started, I guess, the little thing that I would have to do at each home group meeting. And I actually started sponsoring very early on, about 9 months of sobriety too. So I was working the steps very eagerly. I got into them very strong. I had my 5th step done before I was 60 days sober, and I realized then a lot of the things I never knew before. Not only did I have a bunch of junk that I had never told anybody in my entire life that I thought I was going to take to the grave with me, I found out that nobody did anything to me. I didn't have any guns held to my head, didn't have any knives to my throat. I did everything of my own free will. All the things that I thought were just so terrible that everybody did to me, I did to myself. A lot more else, a lot of other things came out of it too. I was able to see some character defects, which did take me a little while to really look at. I think that's one of the hardest things for me even today is to look at what character defects going on in my life, and that's really a part of me. I even got to on to the 8th and 9th step and was making amends and working on the 10th step, and I was staying sober, I was changing, life was becoming wonderful. I couldn't ask for anything better. I was able to go back to school. I got an education, graduated, got a part-time job, then I got a full-time job, and I even got a better full-time job. All the kids were doing great. Everything in my life was really wonderful. But I still had this sense of uneasiness. I actually became miserable over time. It started probably about 3 years ago is when it really started, and I've really had last year was really an interesting year. You could have had another speaker tonight, but you don't because of AA. And that's there's a lot of stuff that that I didn't know about. You know, when it tells us more will be revealed, you know, I had no idea. There was stuff that I had kept buried for so long, I wasn't even aware of it. I was subconsciously doing things, and I had character defects and still within me that were subconsciously at work, and they started to play a role in my life that started to become very bothersome. I was working heavily in service. I was working with sponsor. I was working with sponsees. I was, you know, in my home group. I was doing everything right. It's not that I was doing anything wrong. But I guess there's a term that is used, and a lot of people don't talk about it nowadays, but yeah, I remember hearing it early on and didn't think much about it, but it's called emotional sobriety. And I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't read anything about it, although I know there's a Grapevine book about it. But I do know now from the steps working the steps in my life, and AA being there, that there was a lot at work, you know, going on in my head that I had no idea. I kind of had a little, I don't know, maybe an emotional breakdown about 9-10 months ago. That's at least what I call it today. I don't know really what it was. I found out that through this working the steps, doing a 4th step and a 5th step, that I was actually seeking the love, approval, and acceptance of other people. I was still looking outside of myself for my emotional needs to be met, and it became to where I was demanding that, and I was damaging the people in my life. You know, I said I had always believed in a higher power, and I have. When I got to AA, though, I had pretty much given up that there was a power working in my life. You know, I prayed those shotgun prayers when I was drinking. You know, those bargaining prayers that, you know, God, if you'll do this, I'll do that. And, of course, I never lived up to my end of the bargain. But when I got to AA, I kind of, you know, I didn't really rely on that God. I did rely on my sponsor in the AA program, you know, and then I started developing, a connection with a higher power, and I started using that higher power. But as my sobriety went along, I started falling back on things I did when I was younger, even as a child. One thing that the steps did bring out to me that I never realized, I'd always used my father as my higher power in my life. He always was that, you know, my go-to person. So it actually, over time, I got to where I was not relying on that higher power anymore. I was relying on people. Even to the point where I made a person a god. I put them on a pedestal, and you know, and I used them to meet my every waking need. And it became, I guess we won't call it sick, pretty much. You know, it was not something I wanted to find myself in. I didn't want, you know, who wants to admit that? I surely didn't. And I think it's kind of important to just tell you about it, Dave, because, you know, I'm not the only one that did it. Bill Wilson did it at 23 years of sobriety. He writes about it in The Language of the Heart. He writes a letter about emotional sobriety that, you know, that's what he did, you know. So I didn't feel so bad after I found out about that, you know. And but when I said I had my emotional breakdown, you know, AA was there, and I had people there to, you know, help me start, you know, working on the steps. And you know, the steps work today, you know, then just like they did when I first got sober. You know, I started, you know, I actually really started taking vigorous action. That was one thing. When I told you I didn't want to go back to that person that I used to be. I think that was my fear. So I was really, really pushing hard on the steps. You know, I had someone working with me, and when she told me to do so and so and have it done tomorrow, I did it. You know, so that was I did, almost frantically, working on the steps. I can tell you one thing, I have done more fourth and fifth steps in the last 9, 10 months of my life than I did in my first 6 years of sobriety. So but it's the steps, they have worked, they have really, they've been working in my life. And that's one thing that I can't deny. I can't deny that now that I've been able to take a look at that and see that I was using people, as a God, that I can look back in my life and see that those people did not do things in my life for me that a God did do. I know when I was always taken care of when I was drinking, when I always was able to end up at home and should have been dead. Because those I can't tell you, I lost track of the times that, I didn't know where I was at and who I was with, even how I got home. But a power was working in my life even then. I just couldn't see it. Even in sobriety, I always had a place to live. We always had food on the table. I always had enough. I've never had too much. In sobriety, I've always had enough. And I never did work in my life when I was drinking. I worked, but I didn't work. I worked for my father, so I really was a lazy worker, so to speak. And I have worked in AA. Working on the steps, working on me. That's stuff that I've never, ever could say that I used to do. I used to never think about other people, but because of sponsorship, I've been shown a way to think about others. I've been given, insights and tasks to do in order to think about other people, give things anonymously. I would never even thought of that. I didn't ever think about nobody but myself. I wouldn't even dream of thinking about somebody else when I was drinking, because it always had to be about me. I don't have to do that today. I can think about somebody else today. I do love actually working with other people. That's probably where I get my best insights from about myself. Because when I have someone wanting to know something about something they're going through, I'm able to share something that either I've experienced or that that I'm going through at the same time. And it never fails. I'm always getting that. I'll just go through something and actually work through something, and then someone will call me about that particular topic, and I have the experience. I can remember my first time someone called me about something, and that, it tells us we'll intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. And I remember that first time someone called me, and that happened for me. I've met a world of friends throughout AA. I've been able to have I call them God winks, spiritual awakenings. I've not had just one, but I've had many. There's one I'd actually like to share with you, because I always find it very it's kind of special to me. And, I was telling you about making amends. I actually had made amends to my father early in my recovery. I had written a letter. My sponsor went with me to his grave, and I read the letter to him. But later on, I don't know, it must have been a year or two after that, I told my sponsor that I thought I owed my grandmother an amends too, so we talked about that, and I wrote my grandmother a letter. And I happened to be driving to Fayetteville one day and didn't have the letter with me, and I just something just drew me to the cemetery to, that I needed to go ahead and make this amends. So I pulled in, and I wanted to say something to my father again, so I went to his grave, and I just kneeled to his grave, and all I said was a simple, "I'm sorry, please forgive me." I did that, and I started looking for my grandmother's grave, and it wasn't his mother. She wasn't right beside him, so I had to search, and I don't know if it took me 10 minutes, if it took me 15 minutes to find her grave. But when I found her grave, I did the same thing at her grave. I kneeled and said a simple, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And when I got the words, as soon as the words came out of my mouth, bells across the street started chiming. And I just got chills from head to toe. And it was just one of those moments, that's what I called my God wink, that I knew my grandmother had. I even get chills thinking about it. I knew my grandmother, forgave me, and I was one of those, I wasn't a terrible granddaughter, but I wasn't a good granddaughter. I wasn't a good daughter. I wasn't there when both of them were dying because other things were more important. I always said it was because I couldn't watch them. But the truth was, alcohol and doing what I wanted to do was more important than being there at their bedside. And I wasn't a very good mother when I was drinking. My kids, my last year or so before I got sober, my kids were waking me up every morning to take them to school. They were bathing themselves and dressing themselves and even fixing themselves breakfast. Today, I'm actually waking my kids up and I'm cooking them breakfast before they get on the bus and I go off to work. I still have so much more growth. I'm still growing today emotionally, not just in sobriety, but I'm growing up today. I did make some changes this past year that have been rather large blessings in my life. I did change sponsors. I got someone that I had always, I guess, well, we always told to look for someone that we want what they have, and they offer good sobriety, and not that my other sponsor was anything wrong with her, but I find out we outgrow people, and that's what I experienced. I needed more growth, and this past year has been a growing experience, and I'm still growing. I changed home groups. I got a new home group that I've been able to become a part of. I started doing, I don't know where I was going with all this. So, when I think a tragedy is a tragedy, it's never that way. It always turns out to be a blessing. And that's when some of the things I thought last year was real tragedies, turned out to be blessings in my life. And that's one of the things I never realized. I always thought, things were just given to me, because they were. I didn't realize that I had to earn them. I had to do the work. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'd like to share with y'all. I'm still doing the things today that I did when I first got sober. I'm doing them with a higher power in my pocket now, not Rhonda or not somebody else. I did realize through the step work that this God is inside me. He's not on the outside. He's from within. I have been in the best place in my life in the last couple of, probably 2 or 3 weeks. They've really been great. I don't have that sense of uneasiness or that discomfort that I was feeling, for the last 2.5 years, 3 years. That's another thing they call it is 5-year menopause. So, and the thing of it is, I didn't believe them. When I heard stuff like this years ago, I didn't believe them. When I was 3 years sober and someone said something about you better watch out when about getting 5 years, things start happening, you start, I didn't believe it. But today I do. Today I do. I couldn't ask for any better of a life today. I'm still heavily involved in service. That was something else that my sponsor early on stressed, that I was it's become an integral part of my life. Not only did service at the home group level, I also did the district level, and now I'm at the area level. It's offered me a lot of contacts. I don't know. I'm one of those people. I can go to the general service, our area assemblies, and I just get excited. I don't know what it is. I know it's not for everybody, but I do. I can't say that I want for anything today. My God has given me everything that I want in my life. Not only do I have peace, I have grace. I actually have a self I can live with today. The AA program is a design for a living that works in rough goings, and I still have rough goings. Trust me. I never know what tomorrow holds, and I don't worry about it and think about it today. However, I can, that could change tomorrow, and I'll worry about, this too shall pass works for me in good times and in bad. Because, I was always told this too shall pass in bad times. Well, I've also found out it works, it's good, this too shall pass. So enjoy it. So I try to do that today. I try to enjoy my life. I'm being the best mother I can be today. I'm employed at a job that I love. And I have an AA family that I love dearly. So I'm blessed beyond, I guess, recall. I'm going to cut this short tonight and tell you I've always been a pessimist my whole entire life. And I'm working on becoming the optimist. But I know I'm always an alcoholic. Thanks.